Good afternoon and Jai Hind, dear children. Welcome back to our RRB classes. And today I'll be sharing with all of you the very third story from your own book. And the name of the story is Some Scars Never Heal. Really seems to be very exciting looking into the title, yes. And it has been written by Aman Chandrasekhar. So here we go about it. I'll show you. See, this is Aman Chandrasekhar. And yes, you all must have seen him in our own campus, right? He is from our own branch, Bhagwanpur. And let me read the description he's written about himself. I'm known as the gaming tycoon by my friends, but my real name is Aman Chandrasekhar. I'm from Kushinagar, where Gautam Buddha died in peace and eternal knowledge. So my name and nature are highly influenced by him. My father works for the government and often says that I have elevated thinking. I try and live up to it by writing stories, books, movies, and music have always been my passion. Robinson Crusoe by Daniel Defoe and Assassin's Creed Black Flag by Oliver Bowden fascinate me. So you see, children, he has been a voracious reader. He's too much into reading, and I think he's also a gaming tycoon, That means he must be enjoying the games, right? So that was it. And he also loves watching Hollywood movies. He listens to music by Zayn Malik because they are his stress busters. So what common factor I have been finding among these young authors is that they all love listening to music, and definitely they are into the reading habit. So keep enjoying this reading Mahotsav, children. And today I'm sharing with all of you a beautiful write-up by Aman Chandrasekhar. You may call him Aman Bhaiya. You must have seen him also. Okay, so let's see what he's written. Some scars never heal. Actually, it's very difficult. Scars always remain, and whatsoever you do, it takes time. So let's see what he has written about it. It was summertime, a cool breeze was blowing from the east and birds were chirping. An old man named Robert sat idly in his farm watching the birds. His 8-year-old grandson, Arthur, played nearby. While digging, he found a smooth, round, rock-like object. He took it to his grandfather and asked, "What kind of a rock is this, Grandpa?" Robert took the strange object, turned it over his hand, and told Arthur that it was not a rock, but a skull. Oh my God. So you see the very first paragraph, your Aman Bhaiya has, incorporated mind-boggling factors. Imagine you go somewhere, you start digging, and you tend to think that particular round object to be a rock-like a thing, but then what did you get to see? That it was a skull. Oh my gosh. Well, let's see. He noticed it had a bullet hole in it. Whose skull is it? Questioned Arthur. Robert replied that it had belonged to some poor fellow who died in the war. So it seems to be something related to war. And I remember the previous story which I had shared, that was related to a prince who simply stepped out of his palace and was made aware of the reality, right? But now this story seems to be more captivating as it involves very intriguing things like skull. Okay, let's move on. Hearing the word war, Arthur became excited and wanted to know more. So Robert decided to tell him a story. There was once an 11-year-old schoolboy whose mother was a teacher. His father had died of pneumonia a week after his birth. Poor thing, right? Annoyed, Arthur said, Grandpa, tell me about guns, planes, tanks. So you see, this is very typical of children's behavior. When you just, pinch them about something which sounds very exciting, very intriguing, very interesting, then they will keep on harping on that same old tune that no, that they want to listen to that particular genre. You cannot simply take them away from that particular idea which you had explained before, right? So this little boy, he was harping on that same tune. No, since you told me about war, so it has to involve planes, bullets, guns, and those rockets, bombers, and typical sound of tshum 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 and all those stuff. But then he did not start with that kind of a setup, right? So, listening to that, this little boy Arthur, he was very annoyed. So now what happens? The real story begins. So Robert began. War is not all about those things. It's about people who fought in the war. The invasion of Poland by Germany started a war in which many countries fought against one another. One day, when a certain young boy was playing in the school playground, he saw planes flying overhead. He was excited as he had never seen them before. Pointing, he explained he exclaimed to his mother, who was a teacher at the school, Look, Mom, aeroplanes! So, this is about this invasion of Poland by Germany. And that this is very simple, as you must have been able to visualize that a small boy, when he looks into something like airplanes, and it's since airplanes are very huge, gigantic kind of a thing, and definitely a small child of 11-year-old would feel very much fascinated, isn't it? So when he saw that airplane flying just like this overhead, so the child was very happy to see it, very elated, and simply exclaimed with exclamation that, Look, Mom, there is that airplane flying overhead, right? So you can, keep on listening to my story by keeping your eyes closed as well. You'll enjoy it, I know. The woman picked up her son and started running. Suddenly, there was a loud explosion. A minute before, his school was there. Now, there was just rubble and memories. So, children, this was the disaster that had happened. Okay, so there was nothing fascinating. The boy was so much intrigued, so much happy to see that airplane flying overhead. But then look what happened. It was just a call of a disaster. Okay, that time the boy was near his school building, might have been near his school building rather. So the very next moment, there was that huge blast, and the whole school building was no more. Everything was gone, isn't it? Since there was no longer a school, there was no use for teachers. His mother lost her livelihood. So now what happened? His mother, since there was no school building, so what was the point of having teachers, right? There's no point when there's no school anymore, because That time, they did not have things like online teaching, which we all are having right now, isn't it? You all are getting uninterrupted online learning right now during this pandemic. But imagine that lady who had lost her husband long time back, and she was the only one who was earning for that little child. She lost her living, her only means of her livelihood. Right. So that was very sad. The boy looked at the sky, but instead of birds, there were only planes, and in the fields, soldiers. So now it was wartime. Half the city was burnt, and most people had already left. But the boy and his mother had only each other. They could barely afford one square meal a day. The war had made them live like the dead. There was barely a difference between day and night. So you see, children, there lies the importance of having 3 square meals, the way you all must be having. We all are privileged enough, children, to enjoy the luxuries, to enjoy good food, good clothing, good shelter. Imagine this little one. He had simply nothing. He might not even have had proper food every day. His mom had to think about how to earn and make living and make her only son fed, isn't it? So do not waste anything which you are having right now. So that is one message which you can get. Okay. Mother and son were forced to stay indoors at all times. At night, they had to be in complete darkness for fear of being bombed from the sky. Darkness had truly engulfed their lives. The boy often asked his mother how soldiers killing each other could solve any problems. So you see, that boy had a very innocent thought in his mind. He simply asked his mom, as if, how come killing and fighting would solve any problems? You see, why not they talk, sit and talk, isn't it? So that means the child was also getting worried because he did not enjoy the plains anymore, as he was one of such persons who was able to view destruction in front of his eyes. When one point of time he had seen his mom's school, and the very next moment he found that the school was no more. There was no building. It was just ash and rubbles everywhere. Okay. Good morning, ma'am. Can you tell me? Oh, I'm sorry. I skipped few lines, I guess. Okay. So now when he asked this innocent question, his mother kept quiet. Why? Because his mother had no answer to it, you see. And even if she would, make him understand, after all, he was a little child. How would he know the nitty-gritties, the harshness of the reality? Isn't it? Although he was a part of the reality. She simply had nothing to say. All these things prematurely changed the schoolboy into a young man. One day, someone knocked at their door. The boy's mother picked up a baseball bat, opened the door, and saw 2 soldiers standing there. Good morning, ma'am. Can you tell me who else lives here with you? Asked a soldier in a heavy tone. Just my son. She was shaking with fear. Definitely, one will be always scared, isn't it? When when you'll be all of a sudden, when you find 2 might be armed person in front of you and asking you all absurd questions, which never seemed to be welcomed, isn't it? So same thing happened with this lady also. Each family has to send a male member to fight for the country, irrespective of age. It's a government order. Bad luck for her, because she had the only son, one and the only son, who was her lifeline, who was everything for her. And now imagine you get this order that whosoever be there in your family, if that person is of the gender, if of male gender, has to simply sacrifice himself, his life for country. So poor thing. And that too when, you get to find that the government has ordered irrespective of age, within quotes. Mark my words, children, irrespective of age. So imagine child of your age fighting in the border. Is it actually permissible? I don't think so. It sounds very weird, but then that is totally my personal opinion. It may vary. But he's just 11, said the mother. But there was no arguing with the soldiers. They too were just following orders. His mother tried to run after the soldiers as they drove away in a truck, but it quickly disappeared in a cloud of dust. So that means nobody, children, nobody heard her cry. Nobody cared to listen to her heart's content. Her inner voice was unheard. The boy did not know where he was being taken to and why. All he could think about was his mother. He cried for her until he had no tears left. Poor thing. He kept on crying, he kept on wailing, he kept on asking for his mother, but nobody was able to, hear his cry. Okay. Why would someone send a boy to war, Grandpa? Asked Arthur. So now Arthur was able to actually visualize the whole thing, because he was also of that age. He was in that tender age, right? So he simply asked this question, why, Grandpa? Why he was taken there? That means he was able to sense. He was, I would say, he was trying to be empathetic, right? He was trying to step himself into his shoes, and he was trying to feel how that child must have felt. Life becomes cheap in war, my dear, replied Robert. So his grandfather made him understand that, when there is a crisis like war, nobody pays any attention to the citizens, the people. Whatever the government, sends for an order, everybody has to abide by the rules and the regulations. So this sentence is very important, children. Life becomes cheap in war. Well, I must say kudos to Aman. He has made me visualize while narrating the story to you. I could easily, feel it. I was having goosebumps when I was just visualizing how that child might have felt. Well, let's move on, because you see, life moves on like this. It does not stop for anyone. You just have to keep on moving and moving and moving. Robert continued his story. While the boy was on the truck, he saw thousands of corpses being dumped into the ground. He was horrified and couldn't sleep that night. The next morning, he was given a dried loaf of bread to eat and was sent to the battlefield with a gun which was even bigger than him. He was brainwashed with the thought that every single person who stood in front of him was an enemy. So he had to kill them before they killed him. The sight of the battlefield was terrible. There were bodies everywhere, blood, deafening gunfire, and soldiers screaming in pain. Suddenly, a tall, blue-eyed man with blonde hair, blood on his face, and a rifle in his hand appeared in front of the boy. So, this boy was very much taken aback by the situation that time, because he had never seen such kind of situation, bodies lying everywhere, bloodshed, deafening gunfire, non-stop gunfire. Wherever you turn your head, you just find bodies lying everywhere. So that was just terrible for him. And all of a sudden, he gets to see a man who is, tall. He's carrying a gun and totally filled with blood everywhere. All right. He looked into the boy's innocent eyes and dared not shoot him. He was shocked to see such a young boy in the war zone. He put his weapon down, but the boy thought about his orders, cringed, and pointed his rifle at the man. He pulled the trigger with his trembling hand. The bullet went straight through the man's heart, and he fell to the ground. So you see, that was his testing time. So the enemy was dumbstruck when he saw such a small boy in a battlefield. His heart did not allow him to shoot, but this boy, that means this little child in that battlefield, I would say he performed his duties, whatever order was given to him. So he just shot him in one go. Although his hands were trembling like this, but he did it because he had to save himself from getting killed, right? The terrified boy threw down his rifle and ran, jumping over the dead and the wounded. He was so much scared. He was so much afraid. He felt in his heart of hearts that that was not what he was supposed to do. His conscience was, always chasing him and telling him that, oh, come on, you did something blunder. You should not have done that. But his brains told him that, no, you did the right thing because you had to follow the order for which you were sent, for which you were taken away from your mama, from your family. And his family was only his mom, isn't it? Robert paused and drew a deep breath, like, why have you stopped, Grandpa? Tell me, what happened to that boy? Did he survive? Asked Arthur. So this boy was totally into that replay. He was also a part of that. Robert took another breath and he continued with his story. Although the boy survived the bullet, he had to go through rounds of surgery. The gods were kind to him. The bullet had missed his heart just by an inch. It took months to regain his physical strength. A few months later, when he was sitting in his camp, thinking of a way to go back home, a soldier saw his distress and asked the boy why he was sitting there. The boy replied that he was thinking of how to go back home to his mother. The soldier took pity on the kid and said he would help him. So let's see whether he was helped or not. A few days later, the boy arrived at his house and called out to his mother, but there was no reply. He searched the entire house, but it was empty. He went to the neighbor's house to ask where his mother was. They were shocked to see him alive. They told him that she had died. She had waited a long time for news of him, but heard nothing. So she went out in search for him. A few days later, her body was found near a bridge, a bullet in her head. The boy broke into tears. So when he went back home, he frantically looked for his mom, but alas, children, he could not find his mom. No one was there in his house. His house was bare. It was empty. All the walls, the utensils, everything was simply, not responding to his cry. Nobody was there to welcome him back home, right? And when he started looking for his mother in his neighborhood, they told him that his mom kept on waiting for his son's arrival, kept on waiting for some good news. But I'm also feeling very sad. But, children, when she did not receive any news, she started frantically looking for her son elsewhere. But no news was there. And since it was wartime, she was a victim of the bullet. A bullet was shot in her head, and she died in that spot. So imagine what painful it must have been to the child who, after so many long years, came back home expecting that he would be welcomed by his mom. And then what happened? Nobody was there. He went door to door asking about his mother, but everybody said the same thing. He had no choice but to accept the sad reality and live his life without her. The boy was not sure whether God had been kind or cruel. Kind as his life had been spared, but cruel as his mother was no more. So, you see, children, he was in a dilemma. He was glad that he was alive, but he was very much annoyed and agitated and ungrateful to God, who had taken away his only lifeline, his mom, from him. Let's see what Aman has written now. Grandpa, who was that boy? Do you know him? Asked Arthur, interrupting. Yes, replied Robert. Who was he? Let's see. Robert replied with a smile. I will let you know someday, but for now, go and play. So, this was, it actually has taken me by surprise as well. I think it must be somebody related to Robert. Might be his son, or might be someone else. Let's see. So till now what happened? Robert told his grandson, Arthur, that was the story and that he will, open the secret, whether he knew that child or not, after he comes back from his playtime. Arthur absent-mindedly went off to play. So poor child, Arthur, he was told by his grandpa that he would be told later on. So he absent-mindedly told his grandpa that, okay, fine, I'll go and play, but you have to tell me when I'm back. Okay. Even though the scar from the bullet was fading, the guilt in Robert's mind was still fresh. The guilt of having killed the very man who had spared him his life. So that means that this man who had given him the chance to relive, he had shot him. So it was only Robert who had lost his mom during those war days. This is what I feel. And I'll get back to all of you to know whether you also felt the same. The guilt of having killed the very man who had spared him his life. Yes, children. He was shouldering that guilt of killing that man that day when he was in front of that person. That, remember that tall guy with a rifle, blue-eyed, who was very much surprised to find such a small child in the war zone. So that guilt kept on chasing him, and it was no one but Robert. So it's open to you. We'll definitely discuss about your perceptions. That's all. Well done, Aman. Very well explained. And I'm really glad to have read such a wonderful, intriguing creation. And I hope, children, you all also must have liked it. Imagine, so you see, these young children, their imagination has actually no heights. It can be from alien to, it can go in our past history. It can be beyond your imaginations, right? So let's discuss the next chapter. All right, and please, children, go through the story. It's very beautifully written, and I did not come across any flowery language. The language was very lucid, simple to understand, easy to understand, and definitely it was something which you can visualize. And it went just like a real play in this way. So, happy reading. Stay blessed. Thank you and Jai Hind.